Welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at the Amiga scene in 2024.
Yeah.
Now I know that you're probably thinking Amiga, really?
Yeah.
Isn't that like a, you
Yeah.
know,
Way back.
way back machine from the 80s and 90s? What could possibly be going on in the Amiga scene in 2024? Well, let me tell you.
Right.
We've got some excerpts here from Amigang and AmigaNews.de,
Oh, wow.
and we're going to find out that it's not just gathering dust in some forgotten corner of
Wow.
tech history.
It's truly remarkable how much life there is in
Yeah.
the Amiga scene, even today. It's like a hidden pocket of the tech world that just keeps going. And it really defies the typical narrative that everything old gets replaced by the new.
So we're talking about more than just people firing up emulators to replay their favorite childhood game.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's certainly a part of it, the love for the classics. But what's happening with the Amiga goes way deeper than that. We're talking about new hardware being developed, updated operating systems, a really passionate community that's actively building upon that legacy.
So for those who weren't around during the Amiga's heyday, can you give us a quick recap of what made this machine so special back in the day?
The Amiga, well, it kind of burst onto the scene in the mid-'80s. It was a real pioneer when it came to multimedia and desktop video, and it boasted these like advanced graphics and sound capabilities. I mean, way ahead of its time, really.
Oh, wow.
And beyond just the technical stuff, there was this whole culture that grew up around the Amiga, lots of creativity and innovation, especially in gaming and other creative fields.
Okay, so it was a big deal back then.
Huge deal.
But why is it significant that the Amiga still has this dedicated community and ongoing development all these years later?
Well, it speaks to the power of certain platforms to inspire a real sense of community,
Right.
shared purpose. The Amiga, it wasn't just a computer, it was a tool for creation,
Right.
a platform to push boundaries, experiment. And that spirit, it's alive and well, even in 2024.
It is. And our first source, the Amiga website, really proves that. This website's been running since 1999.
Wow.
That's almost 25 years. It's amazing to think that this online hub has been connecting Amiga enthusiasts for so long.
It really highlights the dedication and passion within the Amiga community.
Yeah.
I mean, to have an independent website run by enthusiasts
Yeah.
thrive for a quarter of a century, that's something special.
Yeah.
It says a lot about the enduring appeal of the Amiga and
Yeah.
the strength of the bonds within this community.
So, and Amiga doesn't just focus on one specific era of the Amiga. I mean, it covers it all, right?
That's right. Everything from the classic Amiga 500 and 1200,
Yeah.
the ones many people remember, to the newer Power PC-based Amigas.
Right.
And even, get this, the world of FPGA implementations.
FPGA. Can you break
Yeah.
that down a bit? I mean, for me and for our listener who might not be familiar with that technology.
Sure. FPGA stands for Field Programmable Gate Array. It's basically a chip that you can reconfigure to behave like another piece of hardware. And so in the case of the Amiga, you can program an FPGA to perfectly mimic the original hardware.
So it's like having the original hardware, but in a more modern and flexible form factor?
Exactly. You get a level of accuracy and authenticity that you just can't get with software emulators.
Wow.
And it's really cool to see the Amiga community embracing this cutting-edge technology.
And it's not just for the hardcore techies, right? It seems like there's something for everyone on Amiga.
Absolutely. It's a very diverse platform. You've got forums where people discuss everything from game recommendations to hardware repairs, in-depth reviews of new Amiga products and software. There are even tutorials for people who want to learn a program for the Amiga.
So it's not just about preserving the past, it's about actively building upon it and sharing that knowledge with others.
Precisely. The Amiga website is like a microcosm of the whole Amiga scene.
Yeah.
This blend of nostalgia and innovation and a deep desire to keep this platform alive and well.
It really makes you wonder what else is happening out there in the wider Amiga world. And that makes me curious to see what we can find in our next source, AmigaNews.de, which is a German website that I guess you could say is kind of like a news hub for all things Amiga. So let's dive into that and see what's making headlines in the world of the Amiga.
Sounds good. I'm excited to see what new developments are out there. Well, just glancing at AmigaNews.de, one of the first things that jumps out at me is just the sheer variety
Yeah.
of activity. I mean, there's news about hardware, about software updates, community events. It seems like it's a
Still pretty active.
really bustling ecosystem.
So give me some specifics. What kind of news is catching your eye over there?
Well, for starters, there's a piece here about a new GUI for grease weasel tools. It's called, get this,
Yeah.
Flux my fluffy floppy.
Fix my fluffy floppy. I mean, that's got to be...
Kind of a catchy name.
That's a great name. I got to admit, though, my knowledge of grease weasel tools is a little rusty.
Okay.
Can you remind me what those are all about?
Of course. Grease Weasel is basically a device that lets you read and write data to floppy disks.
Ooh.
It's become super important, for preserving all those classic Amiga games and software that originally came on floppies.
Ah, that makes sense. So even in 2024, the floppy disk is still relevant for the Amiga community.
Oh, absolutely. You got to remember, we're talking about a platform where the hardware is a big part of the whole experience for a lot of people. So keeping those original floppy disks alive and usable, that's crucial.
Yeah, that makes sense. So this Flux My Fluffy Floppy, that's making it easier for people to work with the old floppies.
That's it. A nice GUI makes the whole process much more user-friendly, especially for, folks who are new to Grease Weasel,
Right.
or who maybe aren't super comfortable using command line tools.
Yeah. I mean, it's just cool to see how this community is keeping, the classic Amiga experience alive.
Yeah.
But they're also making it a little easier to use, for folks who are used to modern conventions.
Right. There's a real respect for that history. But also this desire to make it accessible to as many people as possible.
Now, speaking of accessibility, I also see there's news about new installers.
Oh, yeah.
For WHD load.
Yeah.
That name might not mean much to people who aren't really, in the Amiga world.
Right.
But it's a pretty big deal for people who still use those classic machines.
It is a big deal. WHD load is essentially a piece of software that lets you run games from a hard drive.
Oh, okay.
On an original Amiga. And back in the day, most games were loaded from floppy disks.
Right.
Which could be really slow and cumbersome.
Yeah, I remember those days.
Yeah.
Swapping floppy disks constantly.
Right.
Waiting for things to load.
It wasn't always the most streamlined.
Not at all.
So WHD load was a total game changer because it meant you could install those games onto a hard drive.
Right.
And get rid of those long load times.
Yeah.
Make the whole experience so much smoother.
So these new installers, they're just making it easier for people to set up and use WHD load.
Exactly. It's another great example of the community constantly working to improve the usability and accessibility of the platform.
Yeah.
Even for folks who really want that authentic, original hardware experience.
That's great. So that news about WHD load installers came from amiganews.de.
It did.
I'm curious, what else is making headlines over there?
There's an article about a company called Amiga Kit
Okay.
that's selling a new version of the A600 computer.
Wait, they're making new A600s. I thought those were...
Early 90s.
Yeah, from like the early 90s.
You're right. 1992 was the original release date.
Right.
But they're producing brand new versions.
That's wild. I'm a little surprised that there's enough demand
Yeah.
to justify making new A600s in 2024. I mean, what would someone even use a new A600 for?
It's a good question. And I think it speaks to just how much staying power the Amiga platform has. Some people just really want that authentic, original hardware experience.
Yeah.
And others might be drawn to the A600's small size or affordability,
I mean, it makes you wonder what other classic Amiga models might be ripe for a revival.
It's definitely possible. As we talked about earlier, FPGA technology is making it easier to recreate those machines with incredible accuracy. So who knows?
Right. Okay. Back to amiganews.de. What else is grabbing your attention?
Let's see. There's a piece about Deadline 2024, which is a demo party.
Okay. Now, for a listener who might not be familiar with, the demo scene and demo parties,
Right.
Can you explain what those are all about?
Sure. A demo party is basically a gathering where programmers, musicians, artists, all sorts of creative people come together.
Okay.
And they create these amazing audio-visual demos.
Yeah.
They often push the limits of what a specific piece of hardware can do. And in this case, Deadline 2024 is an Amiga demo party.
So it's like a celebration of the Amiga's creative and technical capabilities.
Exactly. Demo parties are like this vibrant expression of the community's passion and talent.
Yeah.
It's a direct link back to the early days of computer culture when creativity and technical skills were very closely linked.
Yeah.
It's
cool that that's still going strong in 2024.
It really is. And it highlights the fact that the Amiga is much more than just a retro thing. It continues to inspire creativity and innovation, even today.
Now, I'm seeing a lot about the Mr. FPGA on amiga-news.de, and it looks like they're really trying to make this technology more accessible.
Yeah.
I mean, they even have a video explaining what it is, how much it costs, what accessories you need. I mean, it seems like they're putting in some real effort there.
That's a great observation. The Mr. FPGA is really a fantastic entry point for anyone who wants to explore the world of the Amiga, especially if you want that accuracy and authenticity of original hardware, but you don't want to have to, hunt
Include like
down
BDs.
and maintain those vintage machines.
Right, right. So to recap here, we've got people using Greaseweasel to preserve floppy disks, new installers for WHD load to make those classic games easier to play. We've got a company that's actually producing new A600 computers. We've got demo parties like Deadline 2024 showcasing, the creative side of the community. It's a really active scene.
It is, and it's really diverse too. It speaks to the enduring legacy of the Amiga, its ability to adapt and evolve. But I think what I find most fascinating is just all the different ways that people are choosing to experience the Amiga today.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we've been talking about folks who really love that authentic original hardware experience,
Right.
folks who are using things like Greaseweasel and WHD load to keep those classic machines running. But there's also a whole group of people who are embracing
Yeah.
the power and flexibility of modern systems, folks who are using emulators
Yeah.
to run Amiga software on their PCs, or folks who are exploring
Right.
alternative Amiga compatible operating systems like ARS and MorphOS.
Right, right. Amigon touched on those alternative operating systems. So it's not just about clinging to the past. It's about taking those core ideas of the Amiga and bringing them into the present, maybe in the future.
Exactly. And those offshoot operating systems, those are a real testament to the creativity and the technical prowess of the community. They're finding ways to keep those core principles alive in a modern context.
So it's just this amazing spectrum of ways to engage with the Amiga.
It really is. You've got purists who love that original hardware, and then you've got folks who are pushing the boundaries with these new operating systems, with FPGA implementations. It just shows how versatile the Amiga is, and it caters to all these different interests and needs.
Yeah. It reminds us that the Amiga is more than just a retro curiosity.
Right.
It's an actual living, breathing ecosystem
Mm-hmm.
with this really vibrant and passionate community. I mean, it is amazing to see how this community is keeping the spirit of the Amiga alive, in all these different ways. But it makes you wonder, why the Amiga? Out of all the retro computers out there, why has this one managed to, hold on to such a devoted following?
That's a good question. I think part of it has to do with the Amiga's history, its role as a pioneer in multimedia and creative computing. But I also think it's about some of the platform's inherent qualities, the open architecture, the ease of use. It just seemed to inspire a sense of community and shared purpose,
It's like it really struck a chord with people, It wasn't just a machine. It was a tool for self-expression. It was a platform for, pushing creative boundaries.
Absolutely. And that spirit of creativity and innovation, that's clearly still alive and well within the Amiga community. And, they're not content with just preserving the past. They're actively building upon it, adapting it for the present, even pushing it into the future.
Yeah, and it's almost contagious, this passion for the Amiga. As we've been talking, I'm getting more and more curious with this whole scene, and I'm starting to get why people are so drawn to it.
It is infectious. And it's a reminder that technology can be more than just these cold, impersonal devices. It can be a source of community, of creativity, even joy.
Makes you wonder, what other dead tech platforms might be out there experiencing similar revivals, maybe under the radar. Is there like a Commodore 64 scene or a resurgence of Atari ST fans?
Oh, I'm sure there is. I mean, nostalgia is a powerful force. And, as technology advances, it just becomes easier to revisit and revitalize these older platforms. I think the key ingredient is that passionate community, though, people willing to put in the time and effort to keep these platforms alive.
And maybe a platform that had that special something that made it resonate with people, on a more personal level, like the Amiga did.
I think that's a big part of it. The platforms that really pushed boundaries, fostered creativity, and inspired a sense of community, those are the ones that really stick with people.
So for you listening, if you ever find yourself feeling nostalgic for the tech of your youth, don't just dismiss it as a passing fancy. I mean, do a little digging. You might be surprised by what you find. There might be a whole community out there keeping those old flames burning bright.
That's right. And who knows, you might even be inspired to join them. The beauty of these communities is that they're always welcoming new members, people who are eager to share their passion and knowledge.
Well, there you have it. The Amiga. Not dead, not forgotten, but evolving and thriving in ways we could never have imagined. It's really a testament to the power of community, to ingenuity, and to the love for what this platform represents.
Yeah, and a reminder that sometimes the best technology isn't the newest or flashiest, you know? It's the one that continues to inspire and empower people, even decades after it was first released.
We encourage you to check out Amigon and amiganews.de to explore this world a bit more yourself. You might just discover a whole new dimension to this iconic platform and its legacy. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.